Welcome to the J Sizzle Basketball Podcast, and today I'm going to be doing an NBA offseason podcast. I'm going to be going over all 30 teams in the NBA. You know where they're looking at, what they're looking at for the offseason. I'll do the eliminated teams that have been eliminated first from the playoffs. As you know, we only have two teams left in the playoffs: Boston Celtics, Golden State Warriors. So I'll start with the bottom teams first, and then just kind of work my way up to the top, and then eventually, obviously, we'll get to all 30 teams with their offseason plan. Talk about different things in these podcasts, like cap space, free agents they can target, what free agents they're going to have to try to re-sign, right? And different things, and what I saw from them this year, and what I expect from them moving forward. So today I'm going to start with the Detroit Pistons. I'm going to stick to a very a very organized schedule, and then their next podcast will be about the Oklahoma City Thunder. So obviously starting, with the Detroit Pistons, obviously last year in the draft, they had their one pick and they took Cade Cunningham, which obviously has turned out to be an incredible pick. I understand Scotty Barnes won Rookie of the Year, but I think a lot of that had to do with his team record. He also had a lot more help over there in Toronto than Cade had in Detroit, but I think Cade had a better season than Scotty for sure, and I think Cade will be the best long-term rookie of everyone in this class. Even though it's a good class, I think Cade will be the best rookie. So you look at Cade Cunningham, right? He's a guy who can get everyone else involved on the team. Right? He's a guy who needs to learn how to shoot the three-point ball a little bit more consistently, but he doesn't shoot it bad. Gets to the rim really well, has a good mid-range shot, plays great defense, and rebounds well. He does everything well on the court. He really does. So just continue to have him develop his three-point shot will turn him into a 23, 24-point per game scorer a night. With the ability and the other things he can do on the floor, will turn him into one of the best players in the world very, very soon. So they have their cornerstone. For the first time in a long time, the Detroit Pistons finally have a cornerstone piece to build around in Cade Cunningham. So now, obviously, the big goal is to build around Cade Cunningham and then obviously see where that can take you. My opinion, we'll be able to take him definitely really good places. Cade, like I said, I think will be a top 10 player in the league very soon, in a couple of years here. So, obviously, I think he could be kind of like when I'm looking at his career, maybe kind of like a Luka Doncic. I don't think he'll be as good, I think because he won't be able to ever shoot that as well as Luka, but I think he can be as good as Luka in terms of getting others involved. He'll be a better defender than Luka, but just not as good of a scorer or shooter. But look, Cade, I think next year average 22, 23 per game, 7 assists, 7 boards. In his second year, he can average those numbers, which he definitely can. If he continues on the trajectory he's on right now, would be great going into his second year. And he's a guy, obviously, that will make others around him better. He made Sadiq better this year. Isaiah Stewart got better. Killian Hayes got a little better, too. So he's making guys around him better for sure, and that's definitely one aspect of his game that, a lot of people touch on. Moving into the next phase, obviously you got a guy like Sadiq Bey, who's a really good 3-and-D player. You've seen the ability of him to, make 3-point shots. He takes about 8 a game. He scores 17 points per game. He also had the 51-point outburst against Orlando, which, I think was just one of the better games of the year, honestly. And Sadiq Bey is a guy who, he's continuing every year. You look, last year was his second year, right? He continued to get better. From his first year, he had a huge jump from last year to his first year. Last year averaged 12.2. This year averaged 16.1. 40% from the field, right? You can live with that. You want to get a little higher, but you can live with that 35% from 3. So Sadiq Bey had a solid year, and most importantly, with Sadiq Bey, the one thing about his game that Detroit really likes is his ability to play defense. He's one of the top defenders of his position at his age in the league. And just for him, continue to grow on that end of the floor and just continue to shoot the ball lights out. Now it's not only shooting the ball on the offensive end, it's also him putting the ball on the floor, getting to the rim. He was able to do that this past year a lot more than his first year, and then also be able to get to that mid-range shot, which is something that he was able to do a lot this past year. For Sadiq Bey to continue that trend upwards on both ends of the floor, and I think he can be an all-star one day for this team. So continue to look for Sadiq Bey and Cade Cunningham to be the driving force of this team moving forward. And then you look at guys like Isaiah Stewart, right? He had a solid year this past year. It wasn't just the fight with LeBron that got him popularity. No, he's a great player. And he plays both sides of the ball. He's developing a mid-range jumper to some sorts, right? He did it towards the end half of last year when they went 10-14. After the All-Star break, he developed that mid-range jump shot, which was really beneficial to his game and the Pistons as well. Great defensive player down low and great finisher down low with the paint too, and very good rebounder. So, you look for a guy like him, to continue to develop. Isaiah Stewart, continue to grow on offense. You want to see him next year instead of averaging 10-10, but he averaged this past year. You want to see him maybe average 14-10, 14-11, right? That would be better numbers for him in terms of what I think his capability is in this league, and what I think he'll become. I think he'll end up being one of the 10 best centers in a couple years here. And then you go to a guy like, you got to talk about Killian Hayes, right? Killian Hayes was the top-end draft pick. This was his second year, only 2 years ago. And it's been a little bit of a slow development for him on the offensive end of the floor, for sure. It's taken him a little more time than some other guys to develop that side of the game. But defensively and and also in terms of moving the ball around and getting others involved, he's one of the best in the league at that. At his age, right? Not in general, but one of the best in the league at his age in terms of D'ing up and passing the ball, getting other guys involved, right? I think last year he averaged. Let me look it up here. I want to say it was 6 assists, but let me just do a fact check here really quick. Last year, 5.3 assists. Sorry, it was one off, and this year, 4.2. 38% shooting this year, 35 last year. So obviously that number needs to take a ginormous jump, as well as his three-point numbers, which have been below 28% both years of his career in this each single season. So those two stats have to take, the assists have to take a jump, and the field goal, the 3-point percentage and field goal percentage have to take jumps, right? That's the big part of him developing his game. But defensively, he's one of the better defensive guards at his age. He's a solid passer who doesn't turn it over a lot. He's very smart. And we'll see, it'll be interesting to see if he starts at that 2 guard spot or if they go with Corey Joseph at the 2 guard spot and put Cade to the 1. Obviously, Cade's your cornerstone. He's going to be a starter, but filling that 2 hole is going to be something big for the Pistons to see what they fill it with, whether it's Corey Joseph or, we'll talk later on in this podcast a few minutes down the line about who they could potentially draft. That could be that number 2. Play that 2 guard spot, or it's either going to be Corey Joseph or you're going to see Killian Hayes in there. I personally, if they don't go with Jaden Ivey in the draft, who we'll talk about in a second, the shooting guard, I potentially would like to see Killian Hayes starting there. I think because of his age, because of his ability to grow, I think you need to start him. I think you need to play him many minutes a night. I'm talking 20, 30 minutes a night and see where your team is from there and then move forward from there because he's a big part of this future of this team. I talk about it's really 4 guys that this team is really relying on long term as of now, not including who they're going to draft in the future and not including who they're going to sign because they'll have plenty of cap space moving forward now and moving forward. But they're going to build around Cade's going to be the number 1 guy. Sadiq's going to be their 2nd guy. Probably Killian is going to be the 3rd guy, hopefully, and then Isaiah Stewart's going to be the big man that they build around to run a lot of pick and roll with Cade Cunningham. And then also brings into the fact that, okay, you have Marvin Bagley too, right? Marvin Bagley played center for them last year, on and off with Isaiah Stewart. Now they might trade Jeremy. It looks like they're probably going to end up trading Jeremy Grant for draft picks and a guard or a solid bench player. So if they're able to do that, which it looks like they will, either to Atlanta, Portland, or Dallas is what I've been hearing, then you look at that situation and you're like, okay, now they're out on power forward. So you move Marvin Bagley back to what he normally played in Sacramento, power forward. By the way, Marvin Bagley struggled in Sacramento for multiple years. That's why he was traded to Detroit. But as in his games in Detroit, let me pull up his stats here. He averaged 14. I'm going to take you guys how many games he played. He did average 14.6 points per game, and he played 18 games with 6.8 rebounds. He shot 55% from the floor, 22% from 3. So obviously his 3-point ball, which, has kind of been the same story his whole career, needs a lot of work. But his ability to score the ball from the mid-range area, his ability to score underneath the rim at an efficient rate, he needs a lot of work on the defensive end too, like a lot. He can be a good defender. He has the body to be a good defender. He just needs to put more effort in and be more aggressive on that end. But offensively, he definitely provided a boost for Detroit in the second half of the year when they traded for him from Sacramento. He ran the floor, him and Cade, Cade ran the floor with him, ran a lot of pick and rolls with him, and it really did work out. So hopefully that's something that they continue. He's a free agent this year. So I expect them to sign him. For Marvin Bagley, he's really struggled in his career so far, in his early career. This was his 4th year in the league. He'll be going into his 5th year, so the first year coming off that rookie deal. But for Marvin Bagley, I'm looking at 4 years, $50 million. I think that's a reasonable salary for Marvin Bagley. I know he only played 18 games in a Detroit uniform, but he looked like he could fit the team really well, fit what they're trying to do moving forward. And I think that 4 years at 50, 12.5 a year, I think that's a good contract for Marvin Bagley. I think that's a good contract for Marvin Bagley. I think that's better than what he'll get anywhere else. And I think it's a good contract too for Detroit because I think that, you're looking at Marvin Bagley as a potential building block for this team moving forward. I think that that's a good contract for them where they can save a lot of money moving forward and also not, be forced to pay him a huge, huge amount of money because no one else is going to pay him. So they better not fall into that trap, in my opinion. All right, so you got Marvin Bagley there, right? We kind of pretty much talked about all the guys a little bit. Now I'm going to pull up their cap space, talk a little bit about that, and talk about where they are with that. So let me pull that up here. Okay, here, let me go back. Sorry, I should have had this all pulled up beforehand, but we're good. Okay. So, salary-wise, right, we talked about Jeremy Grant. He has 1 more year on his deal, $20 million a year. We talked about Marvin Bagley's contract expiring. Kelly Olynyk has 2 more years on his deal, $12 million and $12 million, right? Corey Joseph's free agent. He has a player option at $5.1 million. I expect him to I expect him to, take the player option and just agree to stay in Detroit because I honestly don't think he'll make more anywhere else. So I expect him to take that $5 million a year player option. And then you have Rodney Magruder, who's a free agent. Not really a big deal, to be honest, right there. Because obviously Rodney Magruder had a couple good years in the league, but he's getting a little older now. He doesn't really play too much for this team anyway. I expect them to move on from him. I don't think that'll make a big difference. And then you also have Hamidou Diallo has a team option of $5.2 million a year coming up next year. I expect them to exercise that team option. Hamidou Diallo wasn't too bad this year with Detroit. I thought that, he averaged 11 points per game. He shot the ball from the floor, from three-point range, he shot the ball 24%. That's always a concern of his game. He shot 49% for the field, so he's an efficient shooter because of his mid-range jumper and his ability to get to the rim. He's got a really quick first step. He can pretty much dunk on anyone, right? We know his leaping ability, right? He won the dunk contest that one year a couple years ago. But for him, I think the next step in his game to get better is to be able to have a more consistent three-point shot. And if he can do that, he can average 14, 15 a night, and that can really help this Detroit team off the bench because he's a guy that's going to continue to come off the bench more than likely for this team long term, especially if they are able to exercise his team option, which I think they will. And then maybe hopefully after that, they give him an extension this summer. If I'm Hamidou Diallo, I'm looking at kind of the same contract as Marvin Bagley, 4 years, $50 million. Maybe with Hamidou Diallo, you budge for 4 years at $60 million. Go a little more than Marvin Bagley because I think he has a little more worth. But, it can go either way with Hamidou Diallo, really, in my opinion. 12, 13 million a year, I think, is a good asking price and a good set price for Hamidou Diallo, in my opinion. Especially long term, he's still relatively young. I think he'll continue to get better as he has in his career, but he's gotten better slowly. Now he needs to just take a big leap forward next year and show the Pistons that he's worth that extension. I don't think if they do give him an extension, they won't give him an extension until next year during the All-Star break when that extension is eligible to give. I think that's when they would give him the extension if they were going to give it to him. Let's see how he plays first half of next year, and then they'll make a decision there. Okay. So with that being said, right, I went over kind of, I went over the contracts for the upcoming contracts for the Pistons and who they still have locked in, who's going to be a free agent, right? And right now in the active cap, the Pistons have $76 million per year going. They'll have $76 million available going into next season, right? So they'll have one of the higher, other than the Knicks, who have a lot of expiring contracts coming up. And then you also have the Magic, who are up there too. The Pistons are one of the top three teams in terms of how much money they have available to spend this upcoming offseason. And that brings into a question, right? Okay, so I'm going to go down the free agent list. I'm going to go over what I think Detroit needs, and I'm going to tell you if I think this guy would be a good fit. I'm going to go over about 10 free agents. Just give a quick rundown of each one, all right? John Wall is going to be a free agent. No. I mean, he has a player option of $42 million a year. He's going to keep that player option, right? So I don't expect him. Let me go. So John Wall player option, Harden player option. Wall stays in Houston. Harden stays in Brooklyn. Westbrook, unless he's traded, stays with the Lakers. Beal, unless he's traded, has a player option. He stays with the Wizards. Kyrie stays with Brooklyn, in my opinion. Okay, then we go down here. Okay. Gary Harris is a free agent, right? I'm looking Gary Harris 4 years, 45 maybe, 4 years 40 for Gary Harris, 5 years 60, something in that range for Gary Harris. He's a free agent, obviously coming out of Orlando. Orlando was paying him a hefty amount, $21 million a year this past year. Obviously, he's not going to get a contract like that again in his career, but he could be a solid two guard next to Cade Cunningham, in my opinion. If they do not go into the draft, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and draft Jaden Ivey, he could be a solid number two guard, either a starter next to Cade Cunningham, depending on what they're going to do with Killian Hayes, or come off the bench, right? Zach LaVine, I'm not budging for Zach LaVine with that team, to be honest. I think Zach LaVine at 27 years old, he's still young, but I don't think he really fits the dynamic of this team. Because I think if you bring Zach LaVine to this squad, right, I think it will take too much of the ball away from Cade Cunningham. Because Zach LaVine likes to play ISO so much, it will take so many opportunities away from Cade Cunningham to create for his teammates and score. And this team is built around Cade Cunningham. Let's not forget that. Even if they were to go get Zach LaVine, it's not Zach LaVine's team. It's still Cade Cunningham's team. Now and moving forward, right, for the next 10 years, however long he stays, right, if everything goes according to plan, which, and his, we saw what he was able to do his rookie year. If he continues on this trajectory, he's going to be a Hall of Fame player who's going to be an all-star, honestly, potentially by next year. So, look, I mean, LaVine's a great player, but I don't think he fits this team. Ricky Rubio, honestly, I don't hate that pickup. I think that could be a good pickup right there. Iguodala, no, obviously you're not going to go there. Iguodala might retire at 38 years old. He's had a heck of a career, Hall of Famer. I really enjoyed watching him. So if he does retire, kudos to him because he's had a heck of a career, and I've really enjoyed watching him every minute. He's one of my favorite players of all time. But no, not a reliable option for Detroit at his age. Joe Ingles, okay, not a bad option, right? But see this Nurkic, I don't love it. You have big man presence already. Jeremy Lamb, I think that's a good pickup. Jeremy Lamb's a good pickup at that shooting guard spot. I know he's 30 years old, but you can give him 10, 12 a year, not pay him too much, right? The big thing with Detroit is that they have all that cap space, and this isn't a super strong free agency class. A lot of the guys that are at the top have those player options, and they're probably just going to stay where they are because they're making all the guys that have player options are $34 million and above, right? Beal, Irving, Westbrook, Harden, John Wall, right? So I expect them to keep those player options, right? But if you look at for example, like if you look at Detroit moving forward, right, they have all this cap space. This isn't a super strong free agency class. If you go into, for example, let me go to next year's free agency class, 2023. Look at this. Hold on, let me hit update here. Hold on. This is where you can really strike the gold right here. Listen to this, right? LeBron. Obviously, you're not going to get LeBron, right? James Harden. You don't know. You don't know what can happen, right? More than likely, no, but you don't know what can happen. Westbrook. Middleton, right? You don't love Westbrook. Middleton will be good to pick up. Beal will finally be an actual free agent, and you don't know where he'll want to go. You'll have Kristaps Porzingis. You'll have Kyrie Irving. And then if you go into 2024, so 2023 is good, but if you go into 2024, this is where it really strikes, in my opinion. And I know I said that before, but I like this one better. Paul George, player option. He might leave. If they don't win a championship, he could leave. Lillard. Kawhi, Clay, Tobias, Middleton, Siakam, Drew Holiday, CJ McCollum, Towns, Booker. A lot of free agents coming up in 2024. I think that's Detroit's year to strike. I think Detroit needs to build up a contending team in the next, not a contending team, but in the next 2 years, build up a team that can next year make the play-in. The year after be a top 7-8 seed. Not even be in that play-in. Sorry, be a top 7 seed. Not top 6 to 1 seed, not be in that play-in situation 2 years from now. And if they can do that, I think a lot of free agents will have attraction to go there if Cade, Sadiq, Killian, Isaiah Stewart all develop on their path, and then whoever they draft in this upcoming draft, which I'll go over in a second before I close it out. I think, Detroit's not a super attractive destination at the end of the day, but let me tell you something. I mean, winning means a lot to these guys. And when they can get a big-time contract from Detroit because they have a ton of money to spend, and they can be guaranteed to be on a young team that can contend with one more big piece, if that's Detroit continues of this trajectory, telling you, I think the big guy could go to Detroit, and don't be surprised if they do, right? I told you here first, so don't be surprised. But let's go over the draft really quick. Detroit has the number 5 pick, right? This is a decently talented draft, not great, but it's super top heavy, right? So you got 5 guys that are really good. Keegan Murray, right? You have Jaden Ivey, you have Chet Holmgren, Jabari Smith, and then Pablo Banchero, right? So it looks like Jabari's going to go to Orlando, in my opinion. I think Pablo will go to OKC too. Chet, Pablo, it's been going back and forth, but I think OKC's best pick will be Pablo. Hopefully they go there. Chet goes to Houston at 3. Then number 4 is where Detroit's going to have a little mix up. Right. So you have Keegan Murray, who's a very solid player, right? I think he's going to be a very solid 4 in this league. But you have Jaden Ivey, who I think honestly might end up being the best player in this draft, who a lot of people have slipping down to number 4. Okay. Well, here's the big thing. None of those top 3 teams are going to take Jaden Ivey more than likely, unless we see something shocking. So the big thing is that you have to hope that Sacramento does not take Jaden Ivey if you're Detroit. Now, Keegan Murray, like I said, he's going to be a good player too, but Jaden Ivey would just fit so much better with Detroit next to Cade. Right? And even if you have to bring Killian Hayes off the bench, it's okay. Yeah, he's a young guy. You want to make sure he gets a lot of minutes. He can still get 26, 27 minutes off the bench, and maybe in a couple years win 6th man of the year, right? But if you bring Jaden Ivey to this Detroit team with his ability to score the ball, put the ball on the floor, score in isolation situations, get other guys involved, pretty good defender, great shooter, he could really help his team a lot. And not just in a couple of years, instantly, I think he could average 13, 14 his rookie year and really help his team. So look for him, look for Detroit, hopefully to draft him. Hopefully Sacramento not slips up, but hopefully Sacramento actually becomes smart and drafts Keegan Murray, because I think even though Jaden's a better player, I think Keegan Murray would fit Sacramento's situation that they're in right now better, right? Jaden Ivey's a shooting guard. Why in God's name would you draft a shooting guard when you already have De'Aaron Fox, who you're content on keeping, and you should. He's one of the better young players in the league. And then you have Davion Mitchell, who averaged about 10 points per game last year in his rookie year, and is already turning into one of the best young defenders in the league, who in a year or two definitely will probably be an all-NBA defensive player, who will probably average 15, 16 a game. You don't give up on that, right? You're not going to give up on a guy like Davion Mitchell, who honestly, to me, is kind of like a Marcus Smart, right? That's kind of what he's like. So you will never give up on a guy like Davion Mitchell. I don't think he's as good as Marcus Smart now, obviously, but I think in a couple years he'll be that kind of player. But you can't give up on Davion Mitchell. He's got too bright of a future. And he may even have more offensive skill than Marcus Smart when he came in the league, so he could be a better offensive player long term. Even though, shout out to Marcus, he's been really developing his offensive game. But back to the Sacramento-Detroit situation here, it's really important for Sacramento to not mess up that guard tandem they have. because they did it with Halliburton. They traded Halliburton, and then they had Bogdanovich too, and they got rid of him. And then they had Hield, and they got rid of him. They've had so many guards, and they haven't been able to develop a lot of the guards. But they finally found one that they've been able to develop in De'Aaron, and they finally found one that looks like he's on a trajectory to develop in Davion Mitchell. So why do you need to bring in another guard when you have two really young guards that you're going to build around in the backcourt? Jaden Ivey's just going to be a bench player if he goes to Sacramento for a lot of his career. That's not the kind of player he is. He should eventually, long-term, be a starter. He might not be a starter for Detroit right away. Like I said, they could go Killian, could go Jaden. If they draft Jaden, I think they'll go Killian. But by the end of the year, this year, or even next year, you want to see Jaden as a starter, right? I mean, that's the goal. If you're going to draft him that high, he's got a really high ceiling. Starter, eventually, needs to be, right? At least after a year, maximum. So, look, I mean, I think Sacramento will end up taking Keegan Murray because I think they will end up looking at themselves and be like, okay, Jaden's the best player available, but Keegan's still a really good player, and we really need a number 4. We need a power forward. After we traded Bagley, Rashawn Holmes is a solid center, we really need a power forward to kind of help complete our starting lineup a little bit. So I think they'll go Keegan Murray, in my opinion. It'll be interesting to see what they go with the Kings at number 4, but I think they'll go Keegan Murray. All the mocks have them going Jaden Ivey. I think they go Keegan Murray because I think Keegan fits their system much better in terms of what they need, not what the best player available is, right? And that's when the draft gets confusing a lot of times for these teams. It's like, do you draft the best player available or do you draft what you need? And Sacramento's going to kind of run into that situation at 4 since those top 3 guys in the draft are going to be gone. In terms of, I'm not saying those are the top 3 in my opinion, but top 3 compared to everyone else, those top 3 are going to be gone. So then you're going to have Sacramento sitting at 4. That's a really weird spot, but Detroit's even weirder at number 5. But if Jaden Ivey's on the boards at number 5, I think Detroit will be smiling from year to year, knowing, hey, we got a big time steal right here, and we're going to go build a championship team in the next 4 or 5 years. So that's going to do it for the Detroit podcast. Make sure to tune in. Next podcast is Oklahoma City. That one will come out tomorrow, and appreciate it.